And we're back. Cross-examined with Mike Troiano. Thank you for the millions, if not billions, of followers that we've gathered so far on our short journey here. Today, we have yet another star-studded event. We have the, capital T-H-E, the District Attorney of the Clark County District Attorney's Office here in Las Vegas, Nevada. I welcome Steve Wolfson. How you doing, Steve?
Michael, you make me sound so special, and I'm really not, but how many millions and billions of followers do you have so far?
Where are we at, Austin?
We're actually at a trillion now.
A trillion. Thank you. A trillion.
Thank you, Mr. Trump.
Thank you. Yes, sir. We're at billions and trillions. There you go. So, Mr. Wolfson, or Steve, as I call you in the hallways.
You can call me Steve.
Thank you very much. You have a lengthy career. You've been a Las Vegas resident for over 40 years now at this point. You started off as a clerk in the DA's office before I was even born. You've moved on your way up through the ranks. You've been in city politics, local politics, because your position as the Clark County District Attorney is a political position. And you just have an immense amount of experience, not only in life, but in the criminal justice system. And since this is cross-examined with Mike Troiano, and although we're law-centric, this is going to be a law-heavy podcast here today. So for the people that are watching, the trillions that may be watching that don't already know you, let's start from the beginning, because obviously you didn't just wake up one day and you were head chief DA of Clark County DA's office. How did you get here? What would you like to share with our audience?
Mike, I was born and raised in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, led a pretty normal life growing up. Two older sisters, went to high school, junior college, and then I went to actually my four-year college in San Diego, went to San Diego State. Graduated from there with a degree in criminal justice, because when I was growing up, I wanted to be a police officer in the LAPD. You know, I was a sports guy, baseball, football. I never thought of myself as having a desk job, so I thought I'd be a cop. But when I was graduating from college with a degree in criminal justice from San Diego State, and I was looking at the LAPD, I was told that there was a 500-person waiting list, and they were looking at hiring females and people of color. I was neither. So I was told my chances of getting hired. Take a look.
Okay, all right.
I was told my chances were pretty slim at getting on the LAPD. So I wasn't sure what I was going to do. And somebody said, well, why don't you go to law school? And I literally went like this, like, law school, me? I had no lawyers in my family. But I said, wait a minute. If I go to law school, I can stay a student in San Diego for another 3 years, living at the beach. So I applied to a few law schools, got accepted, graduated from law school. Wasn't sure what I was going to do, but the last year of law school, there was on the job placement board a job notice for a law clerk in the Clark County DA's office. I didn't know where Clark County was. Now, growing up in Los Angeles, I had been coming to Las Vegas to visit and have some fun. So my friend said, that's Las Vegas, you idiot. So I said, well, why not apply to be a law clerk? They were coming to my law school to conduct the interviews. I interviewed. The guy liked me. He invited me to Las Vegas for a follow-up interview. I said, what the heck? I did that follow-up interview, and a month later, they offered me a job to start as a law clerk in the Clark County DA's office. I remember calling up my dad and saying, Dad, I just got offered a job in Vegas. What do I do? He said, take it.
Showroom?
So I called the guy back, and I started in August. Actually, it was September 2nd of 1980 as a law clerk in the DA's office. So 45 years and a few months ago, I started my career as a law clerk in the DA's office, the same office I now manage.
That's pretty impressive. Now, there's a little bit more to that story. You also were in local politics as a city councilman. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure.
And what made you dive from either government work or private practice, depending where you were at in your career at that time, into the political arena?
Well, I was a young DA for about 5.5 years. Loved it. Loved prosecuting cases. But a couple of my friends went over to the U.S. Attorney's Office. Sounded like a nice change. I went over there for a couple of years. But then I met a guy who had a law firm here, and he offered me a job to go into private practice. So in 1987, I went into private practice with Justice Mark Gibbons.
Okay.
Mark is now retired from the Nevada Supreme Court, and I was with him for about 3 years. But I wanted to be on my own. So I opened up my own law practice and practiced criminal defense for about 25 years. I met my wife way back when. She joined me in the practice. We were law partners for about 10 years. And then one day she said, I want to be a judge. So she ran for a district court position and was successful. She became a district court judge. My wife is now retired Judge Jackie Glass. But after about 25 years of private practice, about 30 years of practicing law, I wanted to mix it up a little. So at the age of 50, I decided to run for city council. It was a special election. There were 12 of us. It was a 6-week race. From the day the city council said we're going to have an election to election day was 6 weeks. I was fortunate enough to win, and I was on the Las Vegas City Council for 8 years. Fun years, Michael. I was serving with former Mayor Oscar Goodman.
That's
and
a
anybody
big
that knows
personality.
Oscar Goodman, yeah, he's got a huge personality, wonderful guy. But then the opportunity came up to be the district attorney, and an appointment came up because my predecessor had resigned, and I think I was ready. So I applied for the appointment. I was successful at getting appointed DA, and that was almost 14 years ago, Michael, that I've been the Clark County DA.
So you start off as a clerk in the Clark County DA's office, work in that office as a local prosecutor, correct?
Yes.
Then you decide to go to the federal level and be a federal prosecutor. You're on that side of the fence. Now, as you know, there's a lot of people in our field, if you will, that are lifers on one side or the other, either lifelong prosecutors, lifelong defense attorneys. Some jump into other areas. There's that natural progression of some defense attorneys that jump into the PI world because they think there's that easy money, and they learn that's really not the case. Nothing's easy in our industry. But what made you decide that you wanted to switch from being a prosecutor or defense attorney? Was it that autonomy that you discussed, that you wanted to be on your own and hang your own shingle? What was really going on, or what were the factors that made you decide to do that switch?
You know, it's a great question. I never really had a grand plan for any of this. But after being a government lawyer for about 7 years, I met Mark Gibbons, and he offered me a chance to go into the private sector. By that time, I had been married and had my first child.
Okay.
Rachel, who's now 38 years old, a stand-up comedian in Austin, Texas.
I've seen her work in a certain movie, yeah.
Yeah, and they're coming out with another one, actually.
Nice.
It just got announced. But I wanted to go out. I wanted to go out into the private sector and make some money, to be perfectly honest.
Okay.
So it was the thrill of the private sector and the opportunity to make some good money and provide for my family.
That's going to be helpful in the long run, right? And then what came into the decision on bringing your wife in? Because I'm sure you two sat down at this and said, hey, we love each other. We see each other all day, at night. We're raising children. I'm in that position now with 2 young girls at home. There's a lot of stressors, no matter how much love and how much dedication is there in a marriage. What kind of discussions did you guys have about not only having a partnership for life and raising daughters, to say, but we're also going to be in business together?
Yeah, a lot of people say that they could never work with their spouse, and I think it just depends on the dynamic between the individuals. Jackie, after 41 years of marriage, she truly is my best friend, and I think that we wanted to work together because we thought we could do so, and we did. We worked well together. We were partners. We were the first lawyers to advertise criminal defense on television in Las Vegas. And that kind of boosted our practice, and it worked out well. But then one day she came to me and she said, you know what, I want to run for judge. So that's why she ran and became a judge. But we were law partners for about 10 years.
Interesting. Well, my brother's going through that now. His wife just decided to put her hat in the race in district court. So I'll have to connect.
Now, who was that?
Daniel Tarmu.
Oh, okay. Now that's your brother's wife?
Yeah, my brother Joseph, he practices complex personal injury litigation here. He's a partner over at Egglet, and that's his wife. And she's just not even, I think, a couple of days ago, as of the recording this podcast,
so
threw her name in the hat.
You want to hear what a small world Las Vegas is.
Tell me about it.
30 years ago or so, my wife and I lived in the Canyon Gate neighborhood, and we met a couple, and they were the Tarmuds, lived right around the corner from us, and they had a daughter, Danielle. And when Jackie and I were, young adults, she was a little kid, And here we are a number of years later, and now she's running for judge. So Las Vegas is still that small, unique community where even though we've grown so much over the years, you have stories like this where your brother's wife used to be my neighbor down the street.
And we just found that out here live.
Yeah, exactly, live.
I love it. So great insight on your background. Talk a little bit more about the building of the business, because that's something that I'm in. I've been practicing 17 plus years now at this point. Started my own firm when I hung my own shingle January of 2014, and we're growing, we're scaling. What were the challenges that you had early on? Because it's one thing to be a good lawyer. We all strive to be a good lawyer, right? Because that's why they're hiring us, because we're effective at our job. There's another thing, and I'm sure you and I both have plenty of examples of good lawyers that we expect
to be a good businessman.
But to be a good businessman, and they fail in that aspect. Tell us a little bit more about the challenges that you faced or your approach to not only having the hat of being a respected counsel and protecting your clients as a defense attorney during that time of your career, but also being a businessman.
Running a business, yes. You know, I didn't go to any particular school. I didn't take any particular classes. I worked for Mark Gibbons for a couple of years, and he kind of taught me the private sector, but it was only less than 3 years that I then opened up my own practice. And I didn't have any special training or skills. It was all kind of on the job. But I'm a hard worker. I've been getting to my office by about 6:30 in the morning for 35 years. I'm a morning person, and I love it. So I didn't really do anything special. It was kind of learn on the job. But you have to be there. You have to show up. You have to service your clients. What I found over the years, Michael, is being nice goes a long way. If you provide a service to your client, you treat them with respect, they appreciate it, especially in the criminal defense field and personal injury field. You know, clients in the justice system, they're starving for information. Most of these people have never been in the justice system, especially people that are accused of committing a crime or people that are injured in a car accident. So that's our job, is to give them information. That way they can assist us in making decisions. So I took the time to educate my clients. Every one of my clients, when I was doing criminal defense, got their own copy of the discovery to take home and read. They felt like they were participating with me in working on their case. That's the client aspect of it. Now you have employees. In my 25 years of private practice, I had a secretary for 17 years. I had a paralegal for about 13 years. I treated my employees with respect. I rewarded them for doing a good job, because if you don't, they're not going to work hard for you, and they're not going to stay with you, especially nowadays when there's so many law firms that secretaries, paralegals, clerks, they can move around, and if they're not happy working for you, they'll go somewhere else. So I kind of learned along the way to treat my people in a good, positive way, a way that I would like to be treated, and it worked out to be pretty successful.
Interesting, because two things that I gather from that. One, turnover in any business, especially a small business, is not aligned with success. So treating your people fairly, especially in a competitive market. I know you mentioned actually three things that you mentioned earlier, being the first criminal defense firm to advertise on TV. I'll get, friends, family members, even clients will halfway joke, "Hey, where's your, billboard?" I'm like, "Oh, that's for the PI lawyers. They just want to, get a bunch of calls in, right? And see if they get that needle in the haystack, where criminal defense, or at least now modern day, is a little bit more nuanced. Most firms, I mean, you have some legacy firms that are still out there that don't need to participate necessarily in like the online advertising and whatnot. But the strategies sure have changed, because, even if you have a quote unquote big budget, those dollars need to make sense essentially where you're putting them, in order so you can take care of your employees and actually get that to turn into revenue and future clients. And then probably the most important thing that I think you shared with us, and this came up before on our very first podcast with my good friend, and you know him very well, Jack Buchanan, his late great father, the Bucky Buchanan. everybody knows Bucky.
Did you know Bucky?
I did. I didn't. It was like that ongoing joke goes, right, where it's just like, you know, the typical like dad friend where you've met the guy a bunch of times and he's still like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah. Okay.
So
well, you were young. You're still young, but Bucky, I think, has been gone 10, 12, 15 years at least.
I think Clover. Yeah, basically, when Jack came on, I didn't really put the numbers together, but he passed like 2 months after he actually joined the firm because he was a lawyer for approximately a year. He finished up his clerkship. Yes, but no, I got to meet Bucky and got to observe him in court, obviously. But the one big nugget that Jack shared privately in our personal conversations and here on the pod was on that point is communicate with your clients. So yes, something as simple as, and I do the same thing, I always give them discovery and then I'll call them or they'll come into the office for a discovery review and then say, hey, did you review? And they get the deer in the headlights. And I'm like, listen, this isn't a homework assignment. I'm getting paid to do the legal research and work, but I want you to have it. I think it's important for you to read it. Sure.
Most of them, what I found, Michael, over the years is most of them do.
True.
Most of them want to know what the police said and everything like that. You know, there's another thing that I wanted to add to this conversation. I remember when I first went into private practice, you know, there's sometimes a tendency or an opportunity to grow and get real big, to add lawyers to your firm, to add paralegals and secretaries. And I remember some of the senior lawyers to me, the Steve Steins and the Stu Bells, may Steve rest in peace, said to me they made the most money and had the most fun when they were small. Right. And I'll never forget that. And I never went beyond having a total of 3 lawyers in my firm. Myself, my wife, and an associate. And after my wife became a judge, it was just me and an associate, a couple of secretaries, a paralegal, and a runner. I had the opportunity to grow. I had the opportunity to get bigger, but I was always sensitive to what those guys told me. I'm not saying you shouldn't grow and get bigger if the opportunity is there and you do it right. It can be fantastic. But I'll never forget I was told that.
No, there's challenges with scaling, and like you said, most people, at least a lot of lawyers, myself included, I wasn't business heavy in college. I didn't get my MBA. I got a criminal justice degree, same thing. I knew I wanted to be a lawyer, so the background story is a bit different. But you know, it was basically a coin flip between poli-sci and criminal justice. I'm like, all right, we'll go criminal justice and just ride it all the way through. But I don't know if this was Steve Stein who specifically said this, but I did hear that phrase before, is keep it small and keep it all, which, you know, I guess I don't really align with the keep it all portion because, like you said, you need to take care of your people. They have family to feed and they need to be aligned with your vision. But at the same time, grow strategically and not just feel that you're impressive because you've got this staff of lawyers and paralegals and then you're stressing because you can't pay the bills. The work needs to be there.
And another thing I was told was you don't want to be the master of too many trades. You know, some lawyers, they do criminal defense, personal injury, probate, contract law, and all of a sudden you're spread too thin. It's hard to be good at many things. It's easier to be good at a few things. That's why, I mean, I had the opportunity to do some personal injury, and I did a little. I actually did some divorce work early on, but my main forte was criminal defense. And I think that's a wise thing when you're a small firm to just do 1 or 2 areas of law, not 5 or 10.
I would definitely agree with that because time to time when I'm doing consultations and some clients will say, hey, like, what makes you stand out? I talked to 6 lawyers this week. And the first thing I start of is like, hey, we have a really good community of defense lawyers. So if you've called that many, I'd imagine that you've spoken to at least a few that are great at their jobs. But I'm in business, so I say, you know, hopefully that, you know, we align and you want to go with me. But typically they'll ask like, well, what advice would you do if you're shopping around? And I say, avoid jack of all trades, especially in the criminal defense world. You need somebody who eats, lives, and breathes criminal defense because they need to know, like you said, the law, the judges, the prosecution, all of those nuances and in and outs to most effectively represent their clients. Now, we've got a really good background on you and some legacy information. I love it, but I want to transition into some more specific questions.
Sure.
So it's interesting. that you talk about your background from California. And I think that this question is really going to be aligned for you, not only in your current position, being the DA of the Clark County District Attorney's Office, but your background from being California. I'm sure I'm not the first person to say this.
I think I know where you're going.
I bet you do. You can just see it in my eyes. Here, I get this
I'm
response.
not going to let Nevada become the next California.
There you go.
Is that where you were going?
Close.
Kind of.
I'll get there. So I have clients to this day, a lot of them from California, that they don't understand necessarily the concept of accountability, if you will. They're almost angry when I explain the realities that Nevada takes criminal conduct serious. And they say, well, in California, it's not like this. In California, it's not like this. And I'm like, well, if you put a gun to somebody's head and, in a parking lot, I don't care if it's in Summerlin at the Trader Joe's or down on the Strip, which to our trillions of viewers out there, parking lots are one of the most dangerous places probably anywhere in the United States. Stay clear of parking lots. But I get that a lot from my California clients. They almost are like offended that Nevada takes crime seriously. And is that just a cultural difference between our sister state and California and Nevada, or is that something that since your tenure in the DA's office that you've worked on and honed on? Because that's a reality, right? We have a lot of people that come in not only on vacation, but almost come here to commit crimes purposely.
Well, it's a great question. I think it's a combination of both. I mean, we're much smaller than California. Our entire state is just under 3 million. Clark County's 2.5 million, give or take. So we're much smaller. I mean, the city of Los Angeles, I think, is 3 million. LA County is 8 million. Just the county of LA has 3 times the number of people we have. So I think their problems are much greater. I think we can be in more control of things. We're a much more law enforcement oriented community. Now we're kind of a purple state. We were much more Republican over the years, but I think with the people that have come into this community, we're kind of about half and half between the R's and the D's and the I's. I mean, the I's actually outnumber the R's and the D's, but we're still relatively conservative. Right now, we've got a conservative Republican governor. He's a former sheriff.
Yep.
For me, being a law enforcement person, I love having a former sheriff as our governor. He does a good job in a lot of other areas, but he really focuses on public safety. Like I said just a few minutes ago, I'm not going to let Clark County become the next California. They've passed certain rules in California which are letting more people out of prisons, which allow for many more people that commit theft crimes to be handled as misdemeanors or petty offenses. We were going in that direction a few years ago, but with the governor's more recent crime bill, we've turned back the tide a little. We've lowered some of the thresholds for theft crimes. We've increased the penalties on DUIs. So I think it's a combination of we're smaller, so we're easier to control from a management standpoint, and I think we're just more conservative than California.
Let's project out 25, 30 years when the valley undoubtedly gets even larger. Now, I don't know if we're going to get to LA County 8 million. That seems a little tough unless we start building vertically here in the valley, because the Howard Hughes Corporation only has so much land left up there in Summerlin. But let's say this population doubles and we're closer to 6 million. What do you see, or what would you advise the people that are going to be coming next that you'll be eventually handing the baton to in this office, whether Clark County DA or city local government, or even your conversations with the governor or future governors, to get over that hump? Because if I'm hearing you correctly right now, it's just a lot of it is the realities of a much, much larger county area, city and state, California being compared to Nevada. We're growing. Again, we won't hit those numbers just land-wise, very likely. But what would you advise, and what do you think we can do so Nevada, especially Clark County, doesn't turn into those California areas that are perceived to be a little bit softer on crime as our population increases?
I think the simple answer is focus on what the people really want. People want to feel safe. People want to feel safe when they go to the supermarket and they walk from the parking lot into the supermarket. People want to feel safe when they drop their kids off at school. So if we continue to maintain that focus on public safety, I think that's the first and foremost thing. Number two, as we grow in population, and you've mentioned that we only have so much land. Hopefully the BLM will release more land so we can build more homes, more affordable homes. We need to recognize that we have different cultures here in Las Vegas. When I moved to Las Vegas, I think there was 8% Asian, 12 to 15% Latino, 12 to 15% African American. Those numbers have changed. We are a very dynamic community. We have, the Asian community on Spring Mountain. That's a whole community in and of itself. So I think we really need to look to the future and ask, what are the most important things? What do our citizens want and demand? I think one of the things we need to look at is, we're such an advanced community when it comes to a metropolitan area. Look at the Strip. Look at the money that is generated. Look at the revenue that is brought in because of our casinos. But we have one of the worst public school districts in the country.
Yeah, that's a whole other pod.
These are our children.
True.
Who are 5, 10, 15 years old now. And if they're not getting the proper education and the proper home life, if you will, there's going to be more problems. So I think we really need to look inward on where do we want to be in a community over the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years?
So on those points, I've got two comments. So regarding the dynamics of the ethnicities throughout the Vegas Valley and changing, and the population certainly has increased since I came here. I was born and raised in Las Vegas, Sunrise Hospital in 1983, and spent the majority of my life here other than a little stint in law school and a tiny little stint in Atlantic City when my parents decided to try the East Coast again because that's where they're originally from. But the dynamics have certainly changed. That's true. And what I explain to people just generally, people that don't live in Las Vegas, colleagues, friends, whatever, that I run around and explain, to me, it's like America was designed on the melting pot, right? We had all these people from all these different countries and backgrounds and came here for a united purpose to grow the country and have freedom. I always compare Vegas to that kind of dream, right? That Vegas is the melting pot of America. Yeah. It's a very dynamic community. And then
we're a very young city if you think about it.
Oh, yeah.
You go to some of these other major cities and they're old. You come back to Las Vegas, you really appreciate how young we still are.
And I'm probably off here, but what, 1920s was around the time?
I don't remember when we became.
Yes, it was. One of the last states, battle-born,
yes.
And then the city in itself. And I could be off by a few years, but you're right. It's definitely new. You go back east on a vacation and you go to Boston, and you're like, oh my! It seems like ancient history.
Yes.
And then you go to Rome.
Now you're really
then you're really going back. You're like, all right, you're seeing the tombs and things like that are there. But I didn't expect this from you, but actually it's a really interesting topic, which is the Clark County School District, and I am a product of that. I did public school throughout my tenure here, from kindergarten all the way through high school, Bonanza High School graduate, and so I've always been in public school myself, and have been specifically a Clark County public school student. And I really like the point that you brought up. It's not just the school, but the home life, because you could send somebody, a child to a utopia school, but if their home life is a wreck, it's going to be a problem. But at the same time, you could have a great home life, but parents are working. We're busy people, and whether you have one parent at home working or both, depending on those dynamics, they still spend a significant amount of time at school and need to learn. Now, I didn't really prepare for this because I didn't think you were going to go that route, but it's just so interesting to me. When I've had these conversations before, I think that probably one of the bigger problems, and I'm sure there's a lot more because it seems like we go through superintendents like every 6 weeks in this county. I think we need to break it up. It seems so large, and I could be off on the numbers, so fact check me, fans, but Clark County, the school district, may be one of the largest in the United States.
It's the fourth largest?
Fourth largest?
Like that? Think about it. I think we're the 11th largest county, but the fourth largest school district. That shows you how many kids we have in our public schools.
So based on, as far as I'm aware, you've never been involved like in specifically the schooling, unless that came up in city council, which I doubt it because that's a county issue, correct?
Correct.
But based on your life experience, knowing Nevada, knowing Las Vegas, do you think breaking it up would even remotely start to help the problem? I'm sure it doesn't in itself solve the problem, but is that something as Clark County residents that we should explore?
I'd like to have the magical answer, but I don't. No, I'm a pretty honest guy, and I'm not going to sit here and tell your viewers that I know that much about it.
Okay.
I will say this. I will say that it's been discussed for decades. I would say 10 or 20 years, whether or not we should divide up the school districts. But I am no expert at that, Michael. What I do know is that we need to do something. Now, I have met our current superintendent, Joan Ebert, and I'm impressed. And I think our community is impressed with her so far. But to your point, we've had 6 or 8 superintendents over the last 20, 25 years. We need a little bit more stability. But so far, she's getting good grades. But the subject of whether we should split up or not, that's just not something I feel comfortable opining on.
Fair enough, right? You know what you know, and you know what you don't know. But no, that's interesting. Just as a parent with young children that are in the school district, and you got to think: am I going to do a private school? Am I going to do public school? Where am I going to go with this? And I think those are the complaints I've heard from teachers in the public school arena that are fighting for that want to have pride in that, but also have issues with administration. But as is life. So I want to transition a little bit because I'm sure that in your position, you are second, third, fourth, and fifth guest all the time. Is that fair about your decision making and what
do you mean?
That people second guess
what
you decide daily minute, everybody. So let me give you my completely uneducated 10,000 foot view.
Yeah.
If tomorrow they said, hey, you're moving to X city, large suburban, somewhat similar to Clark County, and you are the DA, Michael, just tomorrow. Again, in
other words, you're not running against me? Is that
absolutely
you're going
not.
on record? You're
to
not
be
running
clear,
against
we
me.
are a
That's
full
one I don't have to worry about.
Yes, sir.
You're a good lawyer, and
Thank
you have a great future ahead of you. But go ahead with your question.
Absolutely. We are a full-fledged criminal defense attorney dedicated to our clients and the private sector. I will not be running for public office probably at all if my wife has it her way or anytime soon. But I live here and it's important to me. So if that imaginary scenario happened, me not being in the position, not preparing for it, this is my immediate game plan. I don't want you to tell me where I'm right, where I'm wrong, and where your philosophy has differed or changed over the years. Okay. So the first thing I would do is focus on violent crime. I think that is flood the zone on violent repeat offenders.
Well, you hit the nail on the head.
Okay.
Violent and repeat offenders. 10% of the people commit 90% of the crime. There's a lot of low-level, nonviolent crimes. People have mental health issues, drug addictions, alcohol, and those folks do need help. That's why we have specialty courts. We have a mental health court. We have a DUI court. We have a drug court. But it's the violent and or repeat offenders that we need to focus on because that's what is hurting people, okay? The violence, okay? Or the person that's coming back before the criminal justice system the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th, 20th time. I mean, how many chances do you give somebody? So that would be my advice to this theoretical new DA in the new town is to focus on the violent and repeat offenders.
Got it. Okay, so my instincts there are fairly correct.
Yes.
That would be one of the first things. My next instinct would be to educate parents on sexual offenses. And that is because until you live it, either on the prosecution side, DA side, judge, just live in the criminal justice system, you really have no idea how pervasive and how much sexual offenses out there, how vulnerable children, adult men, boys, girls are. Yes. I'm a no sleepover family. I enjoyed it as an 80s kid growing up. Life was certainly different. Yeah. And but my daughters won't be having sleepovers because I've defended enough sexual crimes and I want to protect them. And I also want to protect myself. And that is, and I've told my wife if there were ever a situation where there was a sleepover, they would be at our home. And they would have her. They would have the mom at the home too. It would be like a family slumber party where the moms and the daughters, and I would be at the Red Rock Casino at a hotel that night away. Because we've all learned, there's also false accusations in the system. There's true victims, and sometimes there's not. And to me, I think that is paramount to educate families on the realities of what is appropriate, what's not appropriate, and to avoid something that none of us want to be a part of, which is being a victim of sexual abuse or being falsely accused of a sexual crime? Where am I at on that?
So a couple of thoughts. Number one, I agree with you on the education, but it's not only educating the children and the parents, it's educating the school district employees.
Fair.
I was part of a system, I don't remember, 8-10 years ago, where I think I did a public service announcement that went out to all of the public school employees, the teachers, the maintenance folks, the coaches, educating them on what's right and wrong, and it should be obvious, but the consequences. How many times have we read and how many cases do I have where a coach, an adult, primarily male coach, is coaching either other males or females, the gymnastics situation. So it's not only educating the kids and the parents, but it's educating the employees of the school districts. Okay.
That makes a lot of sense.
So that's the first thing. The second thing is, as you know, Michael, my office in the DA's office, I have 200 lawyers, 110 in my criminal division. The DA's office is the largest law firm in the state of Nevada. 110 lawyers in my criminal division, and I'm broken up into general litigation teams that do the general crimes, but then I have specialty teams. I have a gun team, I have a gang team, I have a DUI team, I have a homicide team, and I have a special victims unit team. My special victims unit team is the largest specialty team. It's the largest team of 13 lawyers, and these lawyers do primarily child sex offense cases. So to your point, I have to have 13 lawyers to handle all of the cases. So yes, we need to do something to cut those numbers down.
That would be great. That would be great for society as a whole in Clark County. So it seems like we're on the same page there. So far, I haven't failed as a mythical DA in this new city. The next thing that I would focus on is emphasizing programs for first-time offenders, so that they aren't immediately stuck with a conviction. As we know, even if it's a misdemeanor, can have drastic short-term consequences, incarceration, job loss, etc., as well as long-term, whether that's losing rights or the ability to rent out an apartment or file a loan for a mortgage, etc. Where do you fall with that analysis as an emphasis?
Well, I think you hit another nail on the head. We want to divert the low-level offenders out of the system if we can. The low-level offenders, the low-level first-time offenders, if we can keep them out of the system and provide whatever treatment they may need, everybody benefits. A couple of years ago, I had a little red light bulb go off in my head, and I created a pre-charge diversion program, okay? And what that entailed was on some of these low-level offenses, post-arrest, pre-charge, if the person met a certain criteria, low-level, minor offense, we would give them an opportunity after an assessment to get some help, whether it's drug treatment, alcohol treatment, whatever it is, for a 6-month period. And if they were compliant with that treatment program and stayed out of trouble, we didn't charge them with the crime. That's why it's called pre-charge diversion. Now, some of the defense lawyers didn't like it because the defense lawyers make money when their clients are charged. But it was a help to the accused person. It was a help to the system because we diverted people out, which saved money. It was a help to the DA's office because we didn't have to file charges and litigate. Help to the public defender's office. That program is still kind of in its infancy because of a resource issue, but I'm moving forward with it to the best of my ability.
Well, at the end of the day, business is business, but we all live here in the community. And I think that's kind of a phrase that I use sometimes when I feel like a bail hearing is getting a little contentious. And like sometimes people make it personal when it's not. And I was like, whether it's your honor or the state, like I live here too.
Are you familiar with the Hope for Prisoners program?
I am not an expert on it, but yes, I'm aware of it. Okay. I have clients that have done it before. Yes.
I realize this is your show, and I don't mean to switch roles and
you're the guest,
you, but I'm very involved with our local Hope for Prisoners program. It is the best prisoner reentry program in the country. It's when people are returning back to our communities from federal, state, and local facilities. And this program, Hope for Prisoners, is run by a former federal convicted robber, actually. It provides the best wraparound services I've ever seen. Mentoring, education, job placement, job training, and things like that. Now, this is prisoner reentry. Another idea I came up with a few years ago was, why are we waiting until people are getting out of prison to offer them services? What about a certain class of accused people that are on the cusp of, well, should they go to prison or should they get a chance at probation? Offer them the same wraparound services that Hope for Prisoners offers. So I created Hope for Second Chances, and I'm very proud of that program. It offers a person to participate in the Hope for Prisoners program before the threat, if you will, of going to prison. And if they complete the HFP program, then they get probation and a drop down, and they get all the services they need.
And if they fail,
they
go up to NDOC.
Then they potentially go to prison. Yes.
Got it. Yeah, and
so that's another way of diversion. You know, you talk about offering services and treatment and things like that. It's another way of doing that.
No, yeah, because my initial response was focusing on the first-time offenders, which we established, and that makes sense. But then you also got to figure out the other side of the equation, because this isn't Shawshank Redemption. You don't get out on the boat and go meet Morgan Freeman on the beach, right? I mean,
Zihuatanejo.
There you go.
So you ever been to Zihuatanejo?
I have not. I'll add that to the list. So you need resources, because handing somebody $50 and a prepaid phone, if they even do that at this point, isn't going to be enough. Let's all face it. Like, nobody's going to have those skills, because another reality is most people that end up doing a prison sentence don't have mom, dad, a close family member, because they've already burned those bridges, unfortunately.
Yes. And most of those people are going to return back to the community one day.
Absolutely.
And like you imply, a lot of times they don't even have a driver's license. They're released to the street. They don't have a driver's license. A lot of times they have a place to go, because that's called parole, and they set that up, but they don't have anything. That's where Hope for Prisoners. And I invite you, in fact, I'd invite you to go to a graduation there once a month. They're over at Metro, because the HFP program partners with the police department, because it's a very law enforcement proactive program, because cops want people to succeed too. So I'd invite you to join me for one of their graduations.
I'm looking forward to it.
I've spoken at probably 15 of their graduations. The district attorney speaking at a prisoner reentry program graduation.
Hey, it comes full circle, because I'm sure they weren't really happy in the beginning of that process with you in your office. But as you said, full circle, and we need to give them the resource and to get out. So my last policy focus would be under this mythical situation is that we need to focus on bad policing, because bad policing erodes the public trust, which I think if we don't have, like you said earlier, what does the public want? If we erode public trust, we don't have anything. What do you think about that? Because you obviously are in your position aligned. They are your partners in this. And there's, like, clients tell me, or I tell them, hey, like any job in this world, defense attorney, prosecutor, garbage man, salesperson, you name it, just like police, we're all humans. And there's good ones and there's bad ones. And personally, I think eroding or focusing on the bad policing will help eliminate the eroding of the public trust, and that would be an important aspect of being the overall top prosecutor in that mythical county. What do you think about that?
Well, I will tell you that, again, I've been the DA just a month and a half short of 14 years. And just before I became the district attorney and just after, we had two very controversial officer-involved shootings here in Las Vegas. Eric Scott, who was a gentleman coming out of Costco, who was confronted by the police and shot and killed, and Stanley Gibson, who was in his vehicle. There was kind of a barricade situation, and the police officers shot and killed Mr. Gibson. And our community was in an uproar. In fact, the Department of Justice came in and reviewed policing in Clark County. And they came up with, I think, 81 recommendations after a thorough review of policing and the criminal justice system. And 4 or 5 of those recommendations by the DOJ applied to the DA's office, most of them to the police. A couple of the highlights were more of an emphasis on de-escalation. When police come upon a situation where there's heightened emotion and heightened danger, you don't want to kick down a door and go in guns a-blazing. You want to step back. You want to try and de-escalate the situation. So that was a recommendation. And I can tell you, I've been the DA through, I think, 3 sheriffs now. Doug Gillespie, Joe Lombardo, and now Kevin McMahill. And they all support this new way of doing police work, which is de-escalation. The second thing is the recognition of the sanctity of life. You don't always have to use deadly force. Now, I will tell you, if you point a gun at a police officer, you're going to get shot.
True.
Because a police officer has a right to defend himself and defend others just like you and I. But there's a lot of situations where police have discretion. And rather than use that deadly force, unless it's one of those situations where they have no choice, recognize the sanctity of life. Try and talk that person out of a situation. The perfect example is the barricaded situations, which we see, all too common, where somebody's held up in an apartment, maybe they have a gun, maybe they've got their girlfriend in there. Rather than go in, again, guns a-blazing, you talk to the person, you find out what's going on. You try and de-escalate the situation, because most of the time the barricade situations end peacefully. Now, and I'm a motor mouth. I'm sorry.
It's okay. I was thinking of Waco, Texas, when you're talking about de-escalation in that particular situation.
We've had other incidents, the George Floyd incidents, coincidentally in Minneapolis, and look what we had just in the last 48 hours.
Right.
The ICE situation and the ICE officer shooting the citizen. But I think you hit the nail on the head again, Michael. We want our communities to be able to trust the police, to trust the process. And I think our local police departments do an excellent job. Our police departments have a policy where they do a 72-hour briefing after every officer-involved shooting. Because it takes a day or two to gather the evidence and figure out what happened, but then to have a public press conference where they discuss what happened. And I think that's very important. We don't have a lot of violent protesting here in Las Vegas. We've had a couple, okay? Right. But we're pretty good because our police are very interactive with our community here.
That's good to hear. Peaceful protesting is protected under the First Amendment, but burning, looting, attacking, throwing rocks and projectiles at police officers or anybody else is completely unacceptable for a quote-unquote civilized society, however you look at that. Let me talk to you about the term prosecutorial discretion.
Yes.
You said earlier that you run like the largest law firm in the state of Nevada, and half of that law firm, approximately 100 or so of your lawyers, are on the criminal side of it. With a firm that large, that many lawyers, that many personalities, tens of thousands of cases a year, what is your overall philosophy that you hand down to your team as far as how they manage and judge prosecutorial discretion? Because as I've said before, prosecution has an immense amount of not only responsibility, but power in decisions on what they charge, how they charge, and how they're going to handle that case.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a subject we could talk about for a couple of hours, Michael. Above and beyond everything is under the law, we have to be able to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's the standard in any criminal case in this country. Okay? It's not unique to Nevada. So initially, when a case comes into our office, and I have 10 lawyers that do nothing but full-time screening cases. And it's the more experienced senior lawyers that screen cases. So the first thing they do is look to see if we have enough evidence to file a charge, okay? Because if we don't have enough evidence, we shouldn't file a charge. So they're given a wide range of discretion. We don't want to file lousy cases. We only want to file cases that we feel we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, number one. Number two, discretion. I mean, fairness is above and beyond the model for us. My lawyers don't look in police reports at the race of a person, the religion of a person. I'll give you an example. One of our best lawyers, and I'm not going to tell you who it is, but he retired a couple of years ago. He'd been a lawyer in the office for 30 years.
I know who it is already, but I'm not going to bring it up.
Well, there's been a few that fit into what I've said
Fair
so
enough.
far. But he was a member of the LDS Church, because we have a lot of Mormons in the Las Vegas community. Mm-hmm. And one of the persons from his own church was in a police report. And he didn't even look at the religion or anything like that, didn't even recognize, because they don't look at names. They don't have time to look at names. And he ended up, filing a charge against this person. So that just goes to show you, they look beyond race, nationality, the color of their skin in the charging decision. They make a charging decision based upon the evidence, and we have certain prosecutorial guidelines. We're not charging many real low-level misdemeanors. Mm-hmm. But then once the case is filed, then I've got the other 90 to 100 lawyers that receive these cases and have to resolve them. We resolve 99.9% of our cases through a plea bargain. One of the most aggravating things that I endure as the Clark County DA is the term plea deal. The way the media portrays it is, defendant John Jones entered into a plea deal. Well, we have to plea bargain 99% of our cases. And this is true in every major city in the country, and I know you know that, because we don't have enough judges, courtrooms, jails, defense lawyers to give everybody a trial. So we have to resolve cases. We resolve them through a plea bargain. A plea bargain is not a bad thing. A plea bargain is holding that person accountable. There's a conviction. Oftentimes services are provided to what's needed, and there's justice in a plea bargain. But the way the media portrays it, this defendant entered into a plea deal, they make it sound so bad. So our prosecutors have discretion every day, and you know this, Michael, to enter into plea negotiations. Now, I will tell you this. You give the same set of facts and circumstances to 5 of my prosecutors. 3 or 4 of them will be pretty close, but there'll always be one that's a little harsher than the others or a little bit more lenient than the others. Mm-hmm. And that's because we're dealing with human beings, and we all have different perspectives on things.
No, that's a great point, and I bring that up to clients, and they ask, were we going to trial on this, in the consultation? I'm like, listen, I haven't gone to court. I haven't got the discovery. Mm-hmm. I don't know who your prosecutor is. We don't have all the evidence, but I will say this, high 90+% of the cases on a national level, if you will, plea out. And the reason for that is, like you said, the resources, because our justice system as a whole would come to an absolute crawl.
Collapse. It would
collapse even better than a crawl. And I also, as a defense attorney, don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I'm a taxpayer too. And could you imagine what the budget would have to be in order to go to trial on every case?
And most people would be convicted.
Yeah,
anyways. And they'd be convicted of more crimes and harsher crimes than they would in a plea bargain.
Yeah, and there's also avenues in which I try to work for my clients and work with your office and other offices here, which don't always necessarily end up a conviction, right? We have what's called a stage adjudication.
Yes.
You plead no contest to a charge. You get some sort of agreement on the hoops that the client has to jump through. If they abide by that, the biggest one, typically stay out of trouble. You got to prove you're not going to get back into negative law contact, among some other things. And there can be avenues either for reductions on charges or maybe a flat-out dismissal, which then can turn into a record sealing. And so those are all good. Now, as you could tell, show name, cross-exam with Mike Troiano.
Okay, here we go.
I'm sure that you have not been in this position in a while, so the rules of evidence are lack, Mr. Wolfson.
A little flexible.
Yeah,
here,
a little flexible, yeah.
So I can object then.
You can object, non-responsive, you can go off on a tangent. We see it all here. So we'll start with one of my very first questions on this before we get you out of here today, and thank you for your time.
Sure, it's a pleasure.
You and I are part of an exclusive club, and that's the Girl Dad Club. And probably around my age, I'm 42, you were in the position that I am in a criminal defense firm, trying to grow, trying to scale, trying to complete your mission or stay on board, which is take care of your family, have that work-life balance. But as lawyers, we're very competitive, and we know that our clients' lives are literally in our hands. What advice can you give to somebody like me who is in that position, trying to excel at the mission, at the same time appreciating that these young girls are at home and they need dad time as well?
I'll give you an example. There was a club here in town called the Sporting House, and it was the first fitness club. It was the best fitness club in town. It had a full court basketball court. I'm going back to the early 80s, okay?
Okay.
It had
Austin, you got the time machine?
It had
Okay.
restaurants. It was the best club in town, okay? And it was behind Circus on Industrial Road. And I've always been athletic, and I joined the Sporting House back in the early 80s, and I got a personal trainer. I would try and get to the club because I was an early morning person. I'd get to the office at 6:30. So by 3:30, 4 o'clock, I'm tired. I want to go home. I'd go to the fitness club. But I'd be walking out of the fitness club by about 5 or 5:30, okay, to be home by 6 o'clock so I could be with my family. And I remember seeing other lawyers walking into the club when I was leaving, which means they didn't get home till 7 or 8 o'clock. So the first piece of advice is be home by 5 or 6 o'clock every night. Work hard Monday through Friday, obviously, but be home every night to help your wife with the kids. Homework, feeding them, and all that stuff. Number 2, weekends, okay? Mm-hmm. It was a very common thing for me to be at my office on a Saturday morning at 6:30, 7 o'clock. You go in on the weekends, the phones aren't ringing, the clients aren't calling, you can get some work done. But I'd go in at 6 or 7 o'clock so I could be home by 10 o'clock. You want to be a family person. You want to be a father to your children.
Understood. That's great advice. Make sure that you're there for those dinners, the weekends, the soccer practices, the homework. Even though homework doesn't seem too exciting after a long day of legal briefing.
I'm very lucky. My wife did more of the homework than I did.
Fair enough. So there's that's that house balance. Let's say you hang up the shingle at one point. You're no longer the DA of the Clark County District Attorney's Office, but you get the call. You got one more case. And you have a choice. You could either prosecute somebody that you know without a shadow of a doubt is 100% guilty, or you can defend somebody that you know without a shadow of doubt is 100% innocent. Which one do you pick and why?
Gosh, I'm not sure if I understand your question. If your question is, I'm at the end of my legal career and I have to make a choice between prosecuting one more case or defending one more case.
With the caveat that if you prosecute, 100% that they are guilty, that you are doing a righteous cause. If you defend, 100% they are innocent, and you are equally doing a righteous cause because you've done both sides of it. Wow. Which one do you pick and why?
That's a great question.
That's
why you called it cross-examine. Because I've been a defense lawyer, the reality is most people charged with crimes committed some sort of criminal activity. Mm-hmm. They're not necessarily guilty of everything they're charged with, and there's degrees of culpability. But once in a while, you get that client, that isn't guilty. Those are the tough cases because that person's liberty, that person's life, that person's job, that person's family is on the line, and they're looking at you to get them out of this mess. I think it's harder to defend an innocent person than to prosecute a guilty person. So my answer is maybe I'd take the easy way out and prosecute the guilty person.
Well, you certainly have earned it after this long of a legal career, so I wouldn't blame you for that. And one last one before we call this a lovely day here in the Las Vegas Valley. What is one thing about Vegas that has changed over your years in the Valley that you absolutely love? Because change isn't always comfortable.
Oh, gosh. What has changed that I love? I'm going to think. Gosh, I can think of so many things that haven't changed. Even though we've grown, when I moved to Las Vegas, there was 300,000 people in the Las Vegas Valley. Now we're at 2.5 million. That's a change.
Quite.
But we still have the kind of small town atmosphere. About 50 minutes ago, you told me that your brother's wife just filed for judge, and I told you that she grew up around the corner from me, 35 years ago.
Right.
So we still have that small town, who you know, and kind of a small town atmosphere, which I still love. Number two, I love the weather here. I'm born and raised in Southern California. I don't like the cold. I think the high today is 53 degrees. You know, your producer over here is wearing a heavy jacket. Both of them are, okay? I don't like the cold.
Okay.
I like the warm weather. So that hasn't changed, and I'm glad. And then finally, I'm a blue sky person.
Okay.
I love blue skies, okay? When it's cloudy, it's like I could never live in Oregon where it's cloudy a lot. I like blue skies, and that's something that hasn't changed, and I appreciate that.
I love it. Thank you for your time.
All right, Michael,
Appreciate
a
it.
pleasure.
Thank you. Thanks.
A pleasure.